Hello everybody, my name is Caroline Greener. I'm the International Marketing Manager at CHEM. Welcome to this webinar, Unlock Potential with Cambridge Primary Insight. I'll just start with a little bit of housekeeping. All of your microphones are currently muted. We cannot hear any members of the audience, and this is to ensure good sound quality. If you would like to ask questions, please post them in the questions section located on the right-hand side of your screen. We may answer them during the webinar if they're appropriate at that time, or if not, we'll tackle them all at the end of the webinar. You will receive a certificate of attendance sent to your email inbox 1 hour after the webinar finishes, and also you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording and the slides sent by email next week. So with that, I'll hand over to our presenter, Mark Fraser.
Hello everybody, and thanks very much for joining us wherever you are today in the world. And over the next 3/4 of an hour or so, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about our new system, Cambridge Primary Insight. But before we do, just a little bit about us. We are the Centre for Evaluation Monitoring, which is part of the Cambridge University Press and Assessment family, and we have been working with schools for 40 years now in over 100 countries. We are known best for our evidence-based approach to producing formative assessments. In the past, we've produced paper assessments and computer adaptive assessments as well, and we've worked with schools, ministries and associations around the world. You may know us from our time with Durham University, but in 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge. And we think our unique selling point is that we help teachers turn data into knowledge, and we bridge the gap between research and practice. And we provide evidence to support good decision making, which is what our talk this morning and this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are, is going to be about. So very quickly, I'll just mention I'm the teaching and learning lead at CHEM, and been based in the UK for my working career so far, and I've been with CHEM since 2015. And prior to that, I was a primary school head teacher in 3 schools across the northeast of England. So I'm actually a former user of INCUS, and INCUS is the system that many of you may know about, you may have used, and it's what our new system, Cambridge Primary Insight, has evolved from. So as Caroline might have mentioned, please introduce yourself by dropping comments and questions in the chat, and it would be really useful if you could tell us, are you an existing CHEM customer? Have you used INCUS before? Or perhaps you're brand new to this and this is something completely different. So I'm going to introduce Cambridge Primary Insight and explain a little bit about it to start with. And then we'll talk about the benefits of using an assessment like that. I'll show you some quick examples of what the questions look like and spend some time looking at the reports, and then round up by thinking about how can we use Insight to help improve learning outcomes in your setting. So before we move on, we'll just show you how it's placed amongst the CHEM product suite. So we have assessments. These are all computer-based assessments for very young children up to 18-year-olds. And you can see the third figure from the left there is the Cambridge Primary Insight. So we are using the UK sort of age groups and classes in this, but again, year 1, grade 1, typically this spans the primary phase from about the age of 5 to about the age of 11 or 12, depending on where you are in the world. It's slightly different, but the beauty of Insight is that there's a lot of age-related scores, and you'll see a little bit more about that later on, and you can see how flexible it can be. Again, for those of you out there who are familiar with CHEM and the assessments, we have a breakdown here of the kinds of things that we are looking at within each system. So I'm just going to focus on Cambridge Primary Insight there, the third column along. You can see we have assessment of reading and spelling, mathematics, arithmetic, and something called developed ability, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a little while. And it's a modular system. Each module takes about 20 minutes for a student to complete. You can either complete those modules in one combined session or in separate individual sessions to suit your timetabling requirements. So firstly, what's new about Cambridge Primary Insight? As I mentioned a few moments ago, Insight is the next generation of our much-loved INCAS system, an assessment that's been extensively used by learners around the world for the past 20 years. An enormous amount of investment's gone into developing this recently, and we've got some notable changes to show you in the forthcoming slides. And as well as that, the system behind the scenes has changed significantly to improve the administrative and technical performance of the experience that you have. We've made many of these improvements following customer feedback, while we've been trying to keep a lot of the popular and original functionality that's kept our customers using INCAS for so long. Further improvements include new and improved guidance for teachers, multi-device compatibility. People have been asking for that for a while, so this is a system that you can use on tablets, laptops, PCs. Improved and edited content, so we've updated the content. We've kept a lot of the look and feel of the questions is very much the same, but our team's been looking at reviewing the language. We've had colleagues in Cambridge do this as well, especially with giving sort of students for whom English is an additional language as much chance of accessing this as possible. And again, following customer feedback, we've introduced new reports, including a report that's suitable for sharing with parents or guardians, which presents student scores in an easily understandable way. I'd like to point out that we're still working on Insight. This is a process that we think will evolve over the next few years, and we're certainly, as we move towards its initial release in September, we'll continue to do so in the months and years afterwards. So that means the assessment content of the reports will be further updated to and modified and added to in the future. So this is definitely something that will be moving, and you'll see new things, new features coming along year after year. So what are the benefits of using Cambridge Primary Insight? But maybe before we do that, I was just going to see, I was just going to lean over and see if Caroline's got anything there. Has anybody popped anything in the chat? Do we have a mix of customers, or have we got any kind of existing INCAS customers?
Yeah. We've got Cindy from Vietnam saying she's brand new to all of this and super excited. We have Charles Ellison, Director of Quality and Standards for AISL Harrow schools across Asia. So that's 11 schools using Chem products in one way or another. Tobias says they are a current INCAS school. Yeah, and that's all we've got so far.
That's fantastic. Right, so we've got a mixed audience. So I'll try and be as general as possible for those who are new, and maybe a little bit of detail for existing customers who are familiar with what we do. But in terms of the benefits of using a system or any kind of baseline assessment, what might you be looking for if you were buying a system like this? What would you be wanting to have? And we think these are the sort of the key elements that you would want to look for. And this is something that Insight provides. So it's adaptive. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while, but it's a computer-based system that provides students with a personalized and rewarding experience. The questions that each student receives will be slightly different to their next door neighbor. I'll tell you a little bit more about how it works when we get onto the assessment section. But using a system like this, there's no marking, there's no paperwork required. Students do the assessment, they work through roughly, as I said, 20 minutes, 25 minutes perhaps for some of the longer modules, and they can just focus on what they're doing. The teacher can just be keeping a general eye on what's going on. Again, when I used INCAS, this was something we typically did in a computer suite, or we were lucky enough to have a trolley full of laptops with a class set, so you could have those out in the class. And students just need that kind of sort of low-key management just to make sure that everything's fine and their sound's working and all of those practical things that teachers need to do. But no marking, no follow-up. The reports are generated automatically. It's a flexible and fun system. As I said, flexible, you can use the modules in any order you like, at any time of year. That's a little bit different to some of the other chem assessments. We generally have windows for a lot of our assessments where you do them at the start of the year or at the end of the year. But Insight and INCAS before it are systems that you can use at any time of the year. Student-led, we would say student-led, but supervised for sure, because we want students to be taking this seriously and focusing on what they're doing. But the idea is that typically the student will sit there with a set of headphones on because the audio instructions guide them through the assessment, and they will be hearing something a little bit different to the person sitting next to them. So it's essential that they're kind of isolated and they hear the sound specific to their assessment, not to somebody else's. As mentioned, we have instant insight. The reports come back straight away. And once you've got that information, you can do all sorts of things with it. We'll talk a little bit more about that again coming up in some of the slides further on in the presentation. But this is an objective, research-based measurement that looks at the key success factors for learning. So that's the key areas of early learning from children who are just 5 years old up to 11, 12-year-old students who are kind of on the threshold of moving into that secondary phase. So the data can help you look at individuals and track their progress, but also it aggregates up and you can look at class and year group information as well. So in short, Insight will provide you with a comprehensive and objective overview of what your students know and can do in the key areas of literacy, maths, and reasoning. I did say I'd just come back and talk a little bit about Insight being computer adaptive. So that means each student has a different experience. They're presented with a range of questions according to their responses. So typically, when you see some of the examples later on, I've just chosen examples for the younger children, but we have a vast database, thousands of questions, and we know roughly which question a child of a particular age should be getting right. So if, for example, you're a 7-year-old student, you will see a question that is generally just a little bit, targeted just below your age. So it will be kind of, 6 3/4 or something like that. That would be the first question to see. So depending on who's using this, a different question will be given to them as their starting point, depending on their age. If they provide a series of correct responses, the questions will increase in difficulty. However, if incorrect responses are given, the questions will become easier. And in this way, the students remain better engaged and motivated, and a measure of their ability is more quickly reached using this adaptive approach. So the main modules we've got here, you can see we've got the reading and spelling, we've got general maths, mental arithmetic, and developed ability. So as a general rule, as mentioned, each module takes about 20-25 minutes, possibly as quick as 15 minutes. And because of the assessment being adaptive, each student's experience will be different, and therefore the running times will vary accordingly. So it's possible to work from module to module as quickly or as slowly as you feel appropriate. Some customers like to use all of the modules in quick succession. Others, and I'm thinking probably what I did, I think we spread this out over 2 or 3 weeks even. And 1 week we would focus on the literacy side of things, then the next might be maths, and then the developed ability in the 3rd week. Probably just to fit in with the timetabling that we had in the computer system, in the computer room. So the system's flexible and can just be used to suit your individual circumstances. So moving on, let's just have a look at a few example questions. Again, if you're an INCAS customer, you will see some familiar looking questions here, but they have changed slightly. So we have, in the reading module, we have word recognition. where children are presented with words. Now these work in two different ways. Sometimes the instruction is an audio instruction. Generally, when we have similar appearing words, we ask a question and the student chooses the correct word. Again, I'm showing you some very, very basic questions here that kind of 4-year-olds might be looking at to start with here. Again, as mentioned, general starting point is a question that's suitable for just below the chronological age, and then the sequence follows on depending on the responses. So when we have a word question like this, the word will be asked. So it'd be like dog, dog, and the student would just click on the correct answer. Words that look a little bit similar or sound a little bit similar as well. This is the kind of the decoding side. We're looking more at, so we're verging into the realm of phonics here. So the correct word, as you can see, will change color when it's highlighted. So this question would be dap, dap. And the student looks at all of those words. Is it dip? Is it dap? Is it cap? Is it pad? Is it dad? Choose the correct one, click, and it moves on. And a more complicated question would be presented. So they're the very simple formats. And then moving on, something a little bit more complicated here. We have these comprehension passages, which you'll recognize perhaps from this format in the past. These are called Hunter-Grundens, developed by Elizabeth Hunter-Grunden, an Australian academic a few years ago. And it's kind of a bit like a closed procedure. Many of you will know this as. So the student reads through the passage here. So as I was walking, then what's the next word? Home. So click on home, and that sort of highlights and drops into the box. From my friend's house last Thursday evening. So I'm going to click last, and so on. So they build up the passage, they complete the passage. This is about sort of the relevance, sort of the semantic syntactics of the different words that we're seeing here, so that we can understand not only is the student able to sort of read, decode and read the words, but do they understand the meanings? And does it make sense? Are they assembling a passage which kind of is fluent and makes sense? So, as mentioned, many of the questions are in multiple choice format as well, so with audio instructions, and the student just simply listens to or reads the question and clicks or taps the correct response. Maths, we have similar response pattern. We have 4 modules. We've got the 2 number modules and measure, shape and space, and data handling. And just again, 2 simpler examples here. This is a question to start with. For very young children, you would have some basic sort of counting. It's not a test of reading, so there's an audio track which provides the instructions to the student. They just need to listen. They can play the audio track again. There's an again button that appears in the bottom right hand corner. And just simple things to start with, like here are 3 bikes. If you put 1 more bike in the picture, how many would there be? So I'm hoping that would be 4. So I would click on 4 and it would move on. And it would give me a more challenging question. For slightly older children, we might be starting off with something like this, which would be kind of, there's a measure, shape and space problem here. So we're looking at the different shapes, and there's a kind of a reasoning behind this as well. So they've got to work out which number they need to click on, and you can see 4 option multiple choice at the bottom. So hopefully you get the idea that it looks friendly and and engaging, and students like these. So we have the developed ability module. So developed ability is a useful indicator of a student's capacity to learn and acquire new skills. And we measure it in 2 ways, using vocabulary. Professor Peter Timms, who was one of the sort of the founders of Chem years ago, did a lot of work to show that the vocabulary that students develop at an early age is a fantastic indicator of later success. So we've got this, again, tried and tested method here where we show a word. You can have 5 images on the screen here, and the word is edible. So which of those things best matches that word. So edible, that means I can eat it. So I think I can only eat one of those things there. There's an apple. So I would be clicking on the apple and so on. We also have non-verbal ability, and that's a series of puzzles and problems to solve. And these are some of the more popular ones. I quite like doing these myself. You've got an array of blue dots and an array of white dots. And what you've got to do is look for that blue pattern that is hidden somewhere in the white dots. And again, if you look around, you can see, oh, how can I kind of replicate, those dots? And hopefully you might be able to see that if I click the next slide, it should color them in. You can see there it is, it's hidden there. So a little bit deceptive, because I think I went for the vertical pair, sort of that's slightly lower down to the left to start with, but then you see, oh, well, the rest of the pattern doesn't quite follow through. So students basically click on the white dots to color them in and just copy the pattern, and it's easy to undo. Click undoes it, you can start again, but they're quite fun and engaging. And again, a nice indicator of student ability that is independent of language. So this is particularly useful for students for whom English is an additional language. If they perform well in this section, not so well in the literacy, well, perhaps that's explaining a lot of what's gone on in the literacy section. Maybe the student's language ability is just not quite there yet in terms of them being able to successfully access the content. With a lot of this, we talk about INCAS and Insight now as being diagnostic. They're diagnostic in the sense that they're not clinical tools, but we are just shining a spotlight on particular things that you might want to go back and have a look at. We'll think more about that when we see the reports in a little while. But just before we get to the reports, we've got two sections here as well. We've got the spelling. So the student hears the word, and then they click or tap on the keys to type a word in. So it might be, I don't know, bicycle or something like that. So they B-I-C-Y and so on, and they click to spell the word out. And the arithmetic, formerly known as mental arithmetic, which is very short, snappy, 4 operations type problems. So we start off with addition, subtraction, moving on to multiplication and division. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The theory being that if students are struggling with the more basic addition problems and they don't do too well on this section, they will not necessarily progress. But if students are doing well, they will work their way through the different operations as they go. So that's what we mean by this little box here. You'll see when we see some of the reports, there might be gaps on some of the examples we have, and it's possibly just because the student is performing sort of below expectation. So we're not trying to kind of make the process uncomfortable. We will stop what we're doing and we'll move on to another section. So just before we do the reports, any more comments there in the chat, Caroline? Is anybody asking anything, or
yes,
do we have anything to pick up on?
So Tobias Brown has asked, how comparable will Insight be with INCAS? So for example, if we see a student got 120 in INCAS, does 120 in Insight mean the same thing?
Yes, it does. Yes. So we will have that data continuity. That's something we've thought long and hard about. We definitely want to preserve that long-term legacy that schools have, and have that ability to look back on previous cohorts, or indeed if you've had students who've been using INCAS in the last couple of years, we don't want to kind of derail that sort of process. So the standardization is being matched to what's gone before. We can talk more about standardizations at the end, but yeah, it's a real balancing act, trying to kind of keep what we've got, but sort of move on and improve. But yes, that's definitely our hope. And well, intention.
Yeah. And then Christina has asked, is this meant to be used only once per year, or can it be used twice per year, beginning or end, or once per term? What do you recommend?
At the minute, it's generally just used once a year, but we are moving to multiple windows. So once we get things up and running and our data starts coming in, the plan is that you will be able to use this on multiple occasions, just like you can some of our other systems. I mean, you can use it again, but what happens at the moment is your data will just kind of be overwritten. So if Mark does the assessment in September or January, he will be given a set of scores for that. If it's run again, you can kind of back your data up, you can download your data and keep it. And when you go back again and run it, you will only see one set of reports per year, but the intention is that coming soon, there will be multiple windows. Okay, thank you very much. So having a look at some of the reports then, now we've got quite a departure from INCUS in the sense that a lot of the reports in the past were generated as Excel-based spreadsheets, or kind of some other software, but it's basically a spreadsheet format. And you will still be able to do that because we know there's a lot of schools out there who like to just get the data out and import it into your own systems. That's still going to be possible, particularly if you like to load it into management information systems. That download will still be there. But we do have a new suite of reports which have been designed following a series of customer conversations, which we hope provide a wider range of insight as possible. So we're retaining the age equivalent and age standardized scores that customers tell us they like. So you will see some tables. We highlight a bit more clearly, I think, the differences when we look at age equivalent scores, because that's important to quickly and easily see difference between a child's chronological age and their age equivalent score. We have an improved individual student report, it's like an individual pupil attainment profile. We have, again, box and whisker type plots. If you don't know what I mean by that, I'll show you in a little while, but that's something that's tried and tested. We've seen a lot over the years that people like these, and pupil progress reports. Again, that's multiple assessment points mapped onto a chart. So I'm going to move through these reasonably quickly because there's a few to get through, but I apologize now, some of the writing is a little bit tiny, so you might not be able to read it, but hopefully when you get the slides later on, you can zoom in and you can read in detail what's being shown. But we have a new and improved filtering system. So every report you can filter down, so this basically just allows you to focus on the data that you want to see, looking at individual academic years, year groups, classes, and so on, and just focusing in on what is important to you. So the tables are quite simply presented, we hope. We've got an example here. This is an age equivalent scores table, and you've got the students down the left-hand side, year group they're in, date of birth, so on. Age at assessment. So these, again, this is just sort of made-up data that somebody's popped in, so the the children are not quite born in 2011, but their age at assessment. Can you see we've got, in Abby's case and a couple of the others, well, a few of the students, we've got a window of about a month. So age at assessment. This is because the assessment didn't take, no, the modules were taken across maybe a few weeks. So when Abby first started, she was 9 years and 3 months old, but by the time she'd completed the final module, she was 9 years and 4 months. So about 4 to 5 weeks perhaps here that it's taken to do the assessment. So working through bit by bit. And you can see she was 9 years, 3 months when she did general maths, because her age equivalent score has come out at 9 and 0 months. So that is an estimate that she is operating about 3 months below expectation. But if you look down onto the next row and you can see Ben, Ben was 9 years and 2 months, but actually got an age equivalent score of 9.8 in general maths there. So that's 5 months further on than where we might expect to see a child of that age. And Naya below that, wow, that's a year further on. That's 10 years and 3 months instead, as opposed to the chronological age of 9 and 3 months. So that's age equivalent scores. What we're trying to do here is show you that using our database, we've got thousands and thousands of students who've attended these questions over the years, and we have kind of an age equivalence attached to every question. So this is a kind of average of how that student's performed. So typically they, in Abby's case there in maths, is answering questions that a 9-year-old student would get. So if you are exactly 9 years old and you're bang on track, you would have an age equivalent score of 9 and 0 months, but because Abby is slightly older than that, we're estimating that she's just below where we might expect her to see. So we're not saying what the issue is there, but that's just a case of having a think about that as the teacher and just thinking, is that realistic? Bearing in mind, this is a one-off assessment. You know, we always say this is one tool in the toolkit. You need to be taking all of the information you've got and using it alongside these figures. But as a general indicator, these are really useful scores to work with. Again, when I used these with my staff when I was still in school, this is great. This is kind of stats for the non-statisticians out there. So we've got some really easy to understand scores that relate directly to that child or that student's age. And you get the scores for each of the modules, as you can see. And moving on. So we have, again, age standardized scores. So you've seen the age equivalent scores, age standardized scores. So this is a little bit more statistical in terms of we make a comparison of all the students of the same sort of age who've taken the assessment. And the algorithm behind the formula kind of compensates, makes adjustments to apply a fair comparison between students. And if they are sort of bang on average, as it were, exactly where we expect they might be, they would have a score of 100. So if their score is below that, then they're performing a little bit sort of below age-related expectation. If the score is higher than that, they're doing a little bit better. And the color coding is added to just show how students are performing, either in excess, way above where we think they might be, or well below. If they're just generally within the ballpark of where we think they should be, bearing in mind, again, for the statistically inclined out there, we're using a standard deviation of 15 here. So that means if the average is 100, most students, about 68% of the population, will fall between about 85 and 115. So, and they can vary. We all have good days and we have better days. So student scores, if you tested them one day and tested them the next, we did that, we'd probably get a different score. So will they. So we've got to allow a little bit of leeway. So we highlight the sort of the extreme scores based on the kind of the confidence bars. Again, this isn't a stats presentation, but those of you who know the confidence bars, the sort of the error bars on the old Incas diagrams, this is just a kind of a development of that. And standardized scores are provided for age standardized scores are provided for the reading, maths, mental arithmetic, and developed ability modules. And again, I'm just going to have to pick the pace up. Time's getting on. So individual student report. Again, what you see, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit because it's tiny to read there, but we have two parts to this report. We've got a table and we've got a chart. So for every student, they will get a breakdown like this that shows in the modules, they're the sort of the big headlines of umbrella concepts like general maths. And then in the sections underneath, you have the age assessment and the age equivalent score. There are some gaps in this example, so that links back to what I was saying a little while ago. So this student has not done too well in the basic sort of mental arithmetic section, so they haven't moved on beyond that. So again, they are 9 years and 3 months old, but they've only managed to get an age equivalent score of 6 and 10 months. So that's not diagnosing anything specific other than to direct you. That's a cue for a conversation. That as a teacher, you need to just go and have a think about what's going on there. Ask the child, ask the student what their experience was. Did they know what they were doing? Were they distracted? All those sorts of things. Why have we got that sort of sudden halt? But the graphic that goes alongside, again, is a nice, simple way. It just takes a little while to tune in to what's going on here, but it's quite simple. The black dots represent the age equivalent scores for that student. And the red dotted line across the middle there is the midpoint for the age midpoint for the year group. So that's your sort of general benchmark. So we're expecting most children in the class to be somewhere around that red line. And the grey dotted line, that's the age of the student. Now, so we've got these kind of boxes that appear just to show you, just to draw attention to the sort of the difference between the chronological age and the age equivalent score. And you can see, you know, we've got the first two there, general maths and mental arithmetic. We're a little bit below expectation and a long way below expectation for the mental arithmetic. Reading, though, done quite well there. They're nicely above age-related expectation, above that red line. And again, developed ability, not so good. So again, this is just like, what's going on here? We've got a student here who can read quite well, but they're just sort of not really moving on with the maths or the development ability. So it's a case of having a think about what's gone on in the assessment as an experience. Has there been any distraction where they're just not sure what to do? Again, this is an occasion where you might use your judgment as a teacher to run the assessment again. But you know, you might see this picture and think, yep, that reflects Mark quite well. So I think I'm quite happy with that. That's sort of kind of confirming what I knew. Other reports relate to the groups, as mentioned. So this could be classes or year groups. And you've got good old sort of box and whisker plots if you've seen these before. So that you've got the series of blue boxes. These all just show the spread of scores, the range of scores for each class. So again, this is in sort of UK sort of year group format at the bottom, but you can see also we've got the ages as well. So effectively, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sort of the 6 years of primary education generally. And the blue rectangles, the blue boxes, they represent the spread. So the vertical height shows the spread of scores for the middle 50% of your students, the interquartile range. The whiskers, they're the sort of the lines that stick up and down. They show the range of the most of the highest and lowest attaining students. But then, as you can see, we've got outliers. So that they're the X's. So that if you've got a child who's got quite a low score or quite a high score, we'll mark them on with an X. They're, you know, they're outside the sort of the normal range. So they're doing very well or quite poorly, depending on where the X falls. And not on here, but you can see on this on the key, if we have an extreme outlier, that's marked by a little black ring. Again, you can identify when you see these on the screen. These are this helps you can kind of float over and identify the individual students, but it's all kind of anonymized looking in this view here. The black line across the middle of the box, that represents the sort of the middle score, the sort of the median score for your group. And the green dotted line that's running at a diagonal there, that's just basically kind of the line that shows where your average student should be year on year. So for example, if you are 7 years old, you will have an age equivalent score if you are bang on the average of 7, and so on. It's just kind of a line that just shows roughly where students should be. Parent and guardian report, or parent and carers report. This is, again, tiny text, so I'm sure you can't read that, but I'll just sort of try to squash it all on so you can see it on one slide. But basically, this is a very simple report produced following requests from customers. Some schools have liked using the parent report in BASE and would like to use it in Insight now, so we've developed this. And it's basically a very simple explanatory report, just explains what the student did in the assessment. And when you see the next slide, we've taken out the statistics, and we have just a schematic diagram which just shows sort of a black dot on the line. So we're progressing from left to right, and As mentioned, we have a kind of a window that we expect scores will fall into. That's the sort of the blue shaded area there. So in this student's case, this is Abby's report in mental arithmetic, general maths and reading. She's done really well and is at sort of the upper end of that expected range, but developed ability a little bit below there. So again, this is another cue for a conversation, to have a chat with Abby and see how she got on. But again, we're presenting information in a kind of easy to understand and non-statistical way for teachers and parents. And this is just a really good way perhaps of sharing this information at a parents' evening and just showing how Abby or the other students who've done this have performed in Insight. And then if students do this year on year, we can build up a little profile like this, an individual progress report. So this is a longitudinal chart. So over time, you can see the age is changing there at the bottom, and the horizontal x-axis just displays the year group and the age of the student when the Insight module was taken. So we're just looking at general maths. You can sort of zoom into the other modules as well. And the black dot represents the student's attained age equivalent score. It's kind of linked for the student by the red line. The year group average is shown by the blue dotted line, and the grey line shows the kind of that age expectation again there. So this is just roughly where students should be. So you can see in this case, Norma has started off just a little bit below her average expectation for an average student, and also a little bit below the rest of the students in her class. Then the gap kind of closes into the second year. A little bit of plateauing off goes on for Norma, but for everybody else in the class as well in the third year. But then we missed the fourth year and we zoom up to the fifth year, and you can see we've got some really good progress being made, and both Norma and the class as a whole are above where we would hope they would be. So again, quite a positive picture there. And again, this is the sort of thing that you can build up with multiple iterations. So that's it for the reports, I think. And again, we can talk about these in the questions, perhaps, if you've got anything to ask. Is there anything there, Caroline, or should we press on, because time is getting on a little bit? So very quickly, just to round off, what can you do? This is what can you do with your information once you've got it? So we've got a nice system here that we would like to suggest teachers and school leaders use. You assess, you gather your information. So this is Insight providing you with actionable information. That's information that allows you to identify issues, make improvements, and raise standards. So you need to assess, you need to capture that information and then analyze it, think about it. What are you going to do? Can you see any patterns? Can you see any trends? Can you plan for any sort of gaps in the coverage here, or can you see, oh, hang on a minute, there's a lot of people in my year group here who are struggling with this particular skill, then I need to kind of address that. So this is allowing you to use the data to tailor your teaching. Also, to set expectations and just see where students are in relation to where they should be, and plan interventions. And of course, none of this happens by magic. This is where you, as professionals, come in. You use your professional judgment and you use your skills as a teacher to look at your students, compare our Insight data or your Insight data that we've provided you with the other things that you know, and maybe hold conversations with colleagues and parents, basically target your resources more effectively than you otherwise would. And at the end of the cycle, you may wish to, again, the following year, run this again, have a look, how have things moved on? Has it worked? Have my interventions worked? If not, what do we need to think about me in my class next year with the up and coming children? What do I do a little bit different? And also the teacher who is taking your children on next year, what do they need to know? What do they need to know? Where are the gaps? Where are the needs? So it's patterns and trends which you can address. And then at the end, you can measure your impact. And then very quickly, just to look at it's not just about individual students. This is like a cone fanning out. We can start off with individual students at the bottom there. We've got detailed information about all those students. We can aggregate that up to a class level. You can look at classes, compare classes, what's going on. This helps, when you're sort of deploying resources as school leaders. Where do I need to put my support? What do I need to do in terms of planning for improvements? Curriculum guidance, guidance for teachers to plan more effective curriculum content, and basically setting a kind of common sense measure for target setting. Again, classes can be aggregated up to whole school, year group level as well. If you were in a multi-form entry school, you would be wanting to look across the board. And again, year groups, year on year, you can see this sort of longitudinal process going on. So we have some guidance of our own that you can find on our website, but you can go and find all sorts of information out there, because this is the kind of the so what element. You've done your assessments, you've discovered there are issues out there that need addressing, and we've just got some, this is just me as a teacher putting my teacher hat on. Use our information, but we've got some great websites out there. We're not connected in any way to the Education Endowment Foundation, but this is a UK-based organisation with lots of really good sort of advice on what you might do. Some great guidance reports and some simple, flow diagrams to follow for teachers and school leaders to think, what can I do? I need to improve reading. I need to improve, mental arithmetic. What are the strategies that I might be able to use with my students to accelerate their progress? Have a look. And then just finally, I'd like to just finish off by saying that, Cambridge Primary Insight provides just that very thing, insight. It's insight into what your students know and can do in key areas of learning, in a convenient and objective way, we hope. So we'd be delighted if we could provide you with that actionable information that you can use to unlock your students' full potential. So that's all from me, unless we've got some questions. But thank you so much for listening, and I hope you found today's presentation to be useful and informative. And maybe Caroline, you might be able to just have a look and see if there are any interesting questions there.
Yes, thanks, Mark. That was really fantastic, very interesting. We've had lots and lots of questions, so I would just say we're going to spend a few minutes answering them now. But don't worry, we will answer them all in writing and send them across to you along with the recording in a day or two. So we have a question here from Charles Ellison. Can comparison reports be generated in terms of cohort performance against averages over time, UK schools, international schools, etc.?
So we have comparison reports for cohort performance. Again, that is coming soon. Once we get the data into the system, we can start to do that. So it will be a variation of the box and whisker plot. But yes, so we at the minute, suppose the box and whiskers as we show them are kind of showing your sort of long-term progress, but we are moving to track individual cohorts if that's what you mean. Yeah. Again, it would have the age based on age-related expectation to start with, and we have again we need to get data into the system, but against the long-term aim to have different standardizations and comparisons. But at the minute it is the users of English as a whole that we've based insight standardization on. As insight progresses, we will be evolving to sort of account where you're using it in the world and with which year group.
Okay, so a question from Judy Korakaki, a very basic question. So INCAS and the new format are fundamentally the same in terms of the assessment itself? I think there's very little difference, is there? The back end.
Yeah, there's very my microphone back on. The questions are very much the same format. They've been reviewed for the suitability of the language. They have changed on the basis of how can we improve this for English as an additional language student. Some of the images have changed.
but we've got the
sort of retained the same sort of friendly sort of comic style. And behind the scenes, lots of changes, lots of the admin, the reporting side. They're the big differences at the minute. And as I sit here to speak, our developers are on we call them paradigms.
Types of questions
will be phased in
over the next
year or two.
Okay. So we have a question from Shireen asking, are we going to register for these chem assessments as we do for checkpoint exams?
Is that a question, Caroline? You might be able to answer that better than I can.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a Cambridge international school and you use the Cambridge pathway, the chem assessments fit very well into the pathway. You don't have to be a Cambridge school to use chem assessments, I would just say that, but it does fit really well into the pathway, and it complements the existing progress testing, such as checkpoint, in the Cambridge pathway. Usually the tests are done at different times of the year, so our chem assessments, we call them baseline or formative assessments, and they're usually taken at the beginning of the year to give teachers a really quick and easy to understand baseline of where your student is at the start of the year. And then the Cambridge pathway checkpoint and progress testing then adds to that kind of mix to enable you to have different points of information throughout the year. In terms of registering them, yes, you need to come to the Chem website, get in touch with us at Chem, so that's chem@cambridge.org, or visit chem.org.uk, and just fill in an inquiry form, and one of our team will get back to you and discuss what your needs are.
I've just popped the question there as well, quite interesting, from Lawson there. Yeah, I think, why is Jan's score for 94 flags as a warning, as a score of 92 isn't? I can't track through the slides quickly enough to do this, but basically the flagging depends on which module in which section you're looking at. So what is kind of in line with expectation in one module section might vary from another. So interestingly as well, these scores are based on the confidence levels. And if we've got a wide confidence level, that's kind of a bit of a guessing perhaps going on there. Confidence bands are much narrower if we get that consistency of answers. So if you see flags of like kind of red flags, that's perhaps just an indicator. Not necessarily that the student is underperforming perhaps, but they're uncertain. So it's for those out there, it's something called rationality, which allows us to look at item responses, and if we think there is a bit of uncertainty around it, they will be flagged. And then there's an interesting question at the bottom there. How can this assessment program help teachers maintain discipline? I think again it's there were two types of children. This is my personal view from when I was sort of past teacher and certainly head teacher. Children who are doing very well can quickly become disaffected and maybe bored because they're not being challenged enough. So I think this is a useful way of looking for those students who are doing all right, but just be pushed to do so much better. They need to be kept busy, they need to be challenged, they need to be pushed. And that's really critical to maintaining discipline. We want students who are engaged and motivated, so that's so much for those at the top of the ability range. Equally, I think that applies for the lower ability range. If children feel they're being left behind, they've lost off, they can't keep up, they're going to become a little bit disaffected, distracted as well. So using a system like Insight allows you to look at the profile of your group and think, right, well, I need to really sort of kind of keep the challenge up for these students here. they need support or even interventions. You know, when I say intervention, I mean kind of more long-term structured support. And I think it's, again, a really good way of profiling your groups and making sure that all of your students are differentiated for, treated, you know, according to their needs. And that's central to maintaining sort of discipline and good order.
Okay, we have time for one more question, I think. From Christina. Is there any special reporting element for EAL or SEN students, English as an additional language, or special educational needs students?
We
need the data into the system before we can do this, but we are definitely working on an English as an additional language approach, because we need to see, because we just haven't had in the past, we haven't collected the historic data. So we don't know who and who isn't a student for whom English is an additional language. But as we've moved into the Cambridge family, this is becoming far more relevant to us, and it's something that's not there right now, but is definitely in the pipeline. Again, students for whom or who have additional sort of educational needs, again, that is becoming increasingly important, as well as certainly in the UK setting, and I think it's the same in many places around the world. There's that integration of students into the mainstream, and we need to just make sure students aren't kind of lost there. So again, as we get the data in, we'll be asking those kinds of questions. You know, these children need to be kind of have this sort of data put alongside them when we administer their assessments. And once we know that, we can build up that picture. So at the minute, not yet, but it will come.
Okay, thanks, Mark, and thank you everyone for being so engaged and offering up so many interesting questions. We will be sending you a recording, a full video recording of this presentation, so you can watch it again and you know, sort of process the information in your own time. Again, if you have any specific inquiries or specific questions about your own school's needs, do just get in touch with kem@cambridge.org, and we will put you in touch with somebody who can talk through your needs for you. But for now, that's us going to sign off. Thank you again, Mark, for your great presentation, and thanks everyone for attending. And we hope to hear from you again soon.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.